You know, I'm an awful person for history. When I think back to the 1977 baseball season, I think about the fact how Americans don't think about it. If Reggie Jackson would have signed in Montreal, Yankees wouldn't have won the World Series in '77. We would probably have won enough games to catch the Phillies in the standings, and the Expos would have won the World Series. But unfortunately, with Dick Williams, with his tar paper shack of some of his players, there were only 75 and 87. But what a 75 and 87! And the draft that year established Montreal as a contender, a full contender, within 2 years. Now, in the '77 Montreal Expos, this was their first year in Olympic Stadium after being in Jerry Park. The '76 Olympics were held at the same stadium, and you could even see the road track on the sidelines when the ball went foul. The team did finish fifth in National League East with a strong record of 75-87, which was about a 10-game improvement of the year before. Again, it was a very weird year because they traded 3 bags of chips for 3 bags of chips in the offseason when Pat Scanlon, Steve Dunning, and Tony Scott were sent to the Cardinals for Bill Grief, Angel Torres, and Sam Mejias. Now, Roger Freed was taking a Rule 5 draft, and of all people, prospect Andre Thornton, the other Andre, was traded to the Indians for Jackie Brown, the veteran. Now, on December 16, '76, it was the big deal. Woody Fryman and Dale Murray were traded to the Reds for Hall of Famer Tony Perez and Will McEnany. Now, on March 15, '77, Rodney Scott, who would come back to Montreal later on, was traded to the Rangers for Jeff Turpco. Now, the Expos held their spring training at City Island Ballpark in Daytona Beach, Florida, which was their 5th season there. And, of course, the great 162-game announcing team of Dave Van Horn and Duke Snyder on CBC were aided by Claude Raymond and Jacques Doucette on the French radio and Jean-Pierre Roy and Guy Faron on the French CBC. Now, GM with Charlie Fox, of course, with the great owner Charles Bronfman, the liquor magnate, with, again, Dick as manager. Now, the Expos set an attendance record for a regular season game at the start of the campaign as 57,592 fans attended the first contest at Olympic Stadium. They were defeated 7-2 by the eventual NL East champion Phillies, and Alice Valentine, the Expos, homered in the third inning for the first dinger at the Expos' new home. Now, on April 20th, catcher Gary Carter hit 3 home runs in one game. Now, the '77 season was quite interesting because it was a mix of trades, a mix of farm team, and a mix of free agents. Gary Carter behind the plate, Dave Cash at second, Warren Cromartie at Dawson, and Valentine in the outfield, the magical outfield. Tim Foley at shortstop, Parrish at third, Perez at first, and Don Stanhouse, who would also be a reliever that year as the opening day starter. Now, nobody was going to catch the Phillies that year because Carlton and the boys had an outstanding 60-21 record at home, winning 101 of 162 games. Pirates were only 5 games back, 96 and 86. Cardinals 83 and 79. Cubs 81 and 81. Expos 75 and 87. And of course the Mets, not the miracle Mets of the mid 80s, but 84 and 98. Now Montreal had a very interesting record. They were competitive against almost all teams in the league. They were 6 and 6 against Atlanta, 8 and 10 against Chicago, 5 and 7 against Cincinnati, 4 and 8 against Houston, 5 and 7 against the Dodgers, 10 and 8 against the Mets, 7 and 11 against the Phillies in Pittsburgh, 5 and 7 against San Diego, 6 and 6 against San Francisco, and the Big 12 victories against St. Louis. And ironically, if you look at the standings, ladies and gentlemen, St. Louis's main reason why he couldn't contend at the end of the season, he couldn't beat Montreal. Now, in the Major League Baseball draft, and this was the big thing that changed Montreal, Bill Gullickson, he was a great starter later on, was taken in the first round, the second pick. Then Scott Sanderson in the third round, and Tim Rock Raines in the fifth round. This is one of the best drafts in, I think, Canadian baseball history. Now, a very interesting staff, ladies and gentlemen, because a bunch of no names and up-and-coming players. Steve Rogers, of course, was the big ace. But if you can remember most of these players, you're better than me. Santo Alcala, Bill Atkinson, Stan Bonson, the former Yankee, Jackie Brown, Hal pays his dues, Jerry Hannes, Fred Holsworth, Joe Kerrigan, who ended up being a pitching coach, Lair Landreth, Will McEnany over from the Reds, Dan Chassiter, Don Stanhouse, the Canadian, Jeff Turco, Wayne Twitchell, don't even talk, Tom Walker and Dave Warthen. Catchers were Blackwell, Carter Foote, and Morales. Morales, of course, a good pinch hitter. Infielders, very strong. Dave Cash, Tim Foley, Pepe Frias, Wayne Garrett, Mike Jorgensen, Wayne Garrett, of course, a former Met, Pete McAneen, Stan Poppy, Parrish, Perez, and Spire. Outfielders, you had veterans Del Unser, Jerry White, and Sammy Diaz supporting CDV, or Cromartie, Dawson, and Valentine. Now, Dick Williams as manager, Jim Brewer, Mickey Vernon, Billy Gardner, and Ozzie Virgil as coaches. Now, Carter had a great season with batting .284 with 31 homers and 84 RBIs. Perez had 90 RBIs again, 1981, .283. Dave Cash never hit a home run, but hit a strong .289 with 43 RBIs. Chris Spire, 538, .235. Parrish, 1146, .246. But the triple of Cromartie, Dawson, and Valentine combined for almost 50 home runs. Cromartie had 550, .282. Dawson, .282, 1965. And Valentine, 2576. So generally, like I said, a very, very good hitting lineup. But the bench didn't do much besides Del Unser. Unser had 12 home runs and 40 RBIs, and the veteran Wayne Garrett had 2 home runs and 22 ribbies. Now into pitching, Rogers was the ace, 17 and 16, .310 with 206 strikeouts. Twitchell was 6 and 5, couldn't trust that guy to roll a quarter on a table, .421. Stan Balanson went 89 with 58 strikeouts. Again, the former Rookie of the Year. And Jerry Hannes went 1 of the 5 in 8 starts. Now, Jackie Brown went 9 and 12 in 42 contests. Santo Alcala was 2 and 6. And Dan Chancellor, in only 6 contests, went 2 and 1. Now, Kerrigan, 3 and 5. Wicca McEnany played 69 games, 3 and 5. Atkinson went 7 and 2. Bill, of course. Jeff Turco and Tom Walker. Now, Ellis Valentine, of course, was the big star. Played the All-Star game and did a guest appearance, of all things, on Fantasy Island in the Gary Berghoff episode, where basically a bunch of stars from Major League Baseball were being struck out by the Berghoff character. But what's really stood out for me, ladies and gentlemen, were Cromartie, Dawson, and Valentine the best outfield in 1977? Well, it's pretty close, because the 77 Expos were basically a prelude to the 78 team, and I'll tell you why. Because remember what I said about Cromartie, Dawson, and Valentine. The 77 season, again, they were just, finding their way. 78 was quite interesting for the 3 of them, and I tell you why. Montreal really came on that year. They even though only won one more game, the offense was really starting to pay out. I'll tell you why. Cromartie batted .297, 10 home runs, and 56 RBIs. Dawson, 25.72, and Valentine, 25.76. So 60 home runs on an average of 70 RBIs. And again, Perez was strong too. But what was really hurting Montreal in those 2 years, we paid big money for Dave Cash, but a lack of production. He had 166 hits, but only 43 RBIs. Chris Spire only had 51. So they needed more from the shortstop and second base position. Because, again, Carter, Perez, Parrish, Cromartie, Dawson, Valentine, and the cavernous, Olympic Stadium, could hit it out of the park. But from their bench that year, ladies and gentlemen, this is no lie. You only had 3 home runs from their bench. Enser had 1 and Wayne Garrett had the other, so they weren't getting any production. The starting 8 was what you were seeing on a regular basis. Now, 77, I can talk about this. There was a lot of expectations about 77 because we felt that the Phillies were beatable. We felt the Cardinals were going to be a problem. But with Phillies and the Pirates changing over to divisional lead, if we were an American League team at the time, or even the NL West, we might have had a better shot because we're an NL West team in the NL East, and it didn't pay out. But it was kind of weird, ladies and gentlemen, when Sanderson and when Raines and Gullickson were drafted. We didn't know until about 1980 how good they were going to be. So we were under 500 for those 2 key years in Olympic Stadium, and then all of a sudden we're number 3 in the National League or number 2. It was an amazing time because in 1979 we lost the eventual World Series champion for the NL East. 1980 we lost the eventual world champion in 82. 1980, and then we lost to the Dodgers in the playoffs in 81. So that was 3 straight years losing the eventual world champion. So we were top 2 or top 3. But my God, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think they were taking it seriously. We needed 1 or 2 more players, maybe somebody like a Joe Rudy, somebody like a Sal Bando. They could have easily gone for some former of the Oakland players, maybe Claudel Washington or whatever. Maybe you should have traded for Chambliss, because Chambliss, who was in Toronto, was back pocket for a little while. But that 77 team, ladies and gentlemen, exciting as heck. Because you got to understand, ladies and gentlemen, this was a team that had a whole of Canada cheering for them. They were Canada's team until hockey season started, and it was the Montreal Canadiens again. So the rough stats tell me this, and I want you to think about this for a second. If you've never seen the Montreal Expos of 77 before, think of this for a second, okay? Dave Cash. Okay, Carter had 5 stolen bases, Perez had 4, Cash had 21, okay? Cromartie had 10, Dawson had 21, Valentine had 13. So, like a good running team. They only stole 88 bases that season, but I can tell you 70% of those stolen bases led to the runs being scored. And what was kind of ironic about this, ladies and gentlemen, when Ron LaFleur and Tim Raine showed up later on, they were, I think, between them, they had over 150 stolen bases. That was pretty freaky. But from 1977 to maybe 1983, Montreal was probably one of the most exciting teams in baseball because they had the 2 guns in the outfield with Dawson and Valentine being a right field. How many times did Valentine hit a guy in the plate or second base on a throw? But I don't know what happened to Ellis Valentine. Like I said, he completely lost his mind by the 81 season. I don't know if it was drugs or mental illness, but his stats, again, he was an all-star in 77, okay? 78, 25 home runs. 79, 21 home runs. By 81, he was batting 208. He was batting 293, 289, 276, and 315. And by 1981, again, he was out of Montreal, and we don't really know what happened to him. We still don't know what happened to him. One person said he was he abandoned himself. So I'm not saying we didn't win the World Series because of Ellis Valentine, but a stable Ellis Valentine in the 81 season, even in 1980, there were some injuries too. One guy said, I think it was This Week in Baseball, it might have been somebody associated, he took $1 million talent and turned into a $100,000 talent. Because Ellis Valentine was just as good. I know this is bizarre to say, but you look at the talent of Vladimir Guerrero Sr. for the arm and all that. He was not as good as Vladdy, but he was half as good as Vladdy Sr. That's what he was. He would get you 25 home runs. He would get you about 75 to 90 RBIs, and that's a half of Vladdy. A half of Vladdy's a superstar, because Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is more of an infielder than an outfielder. I don't think he's ever played outfield, but I miss the Ellis Valentine throws from the outfield. I was reminded on his podcast. I saw it on Facebook Reels, and what he meant to us is just completely amazing. Like 77 was a heady season for baseball. Red Sox on a comeback trail, and Reggie fighting in New York, and the last of the A's, and Charlie Finney fucking everybody over. Like I said, there was a soap opera every night, and you didn't even have to watch another World Edge a night in Canada. You just watched the Major League Baseball write-ups. So that's the story of the 1977 Montreal Expos, the best 75-win team in Major League Baseball history, in my opinion. If you like what you're doing here or Montreal Expos Vintage Podcast, let us know. What I like, comment, subscribe, or share.